Story 1. The Encounter with Matt. During a summer outing with companions at a local tavern, I first encountered an individual named Matt. I was with a substantial group, and Matt and I quickly established a connection at the bar, bonding over a City League Hawks game that was being broadcast. My group gradually drifted away from me as I conversed with Matt, meaning he didn't extensively interact with my other friends. Ultimately, we decided to exchange contact information on a popular social media platform, NetConnect, where he maintained a respectable number of followers. His profile images portrayed him as a typical young man in his 20s, fond of socializing, exploring new destinations, and engaging in physical activities. After we exchanged details, I went to locate my group. Honestly, whenever you develop a camaraderie with another person at a bar, the likelihood of ever actually communicating again after sharing contact information is exceedingly low. You always act as if you'll reach out, but by the following day, once you're sober, that initial interest simply wanes. However, the very next day, a Saturday, I attended another outdoor bar and restaurant with my friends, located by the water, for my friend Tyler's birthday celebration. I uploaded a brief update to my NetConnect story as we all serenaded him at the establishment. Approximately an hour later, after we had finished dinner and were simply lingering in the outdoor section of the bar, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find Matt. He greeted me with a smile and a dab, claiming this was his preferred Saturday night gathering spot. This time, I more formally introduced Matt to my friends, stating, "You guys remember Matt?" Even if they hadn't genuinely conversed with him, they had certainly seen him the night prior. As the evening progressed, Matt remained with us for a while, which was perfectly acceptable given that everyone, including him, was intoxicated and simply enjoying themselves. The next time I saw Matt was when he extended an invitation for a golfing session on a sweltering day. Candidly, I am not proficient at golf, but it's a skill I aspire to improve. Therefore, when he invited me early one Sunday morning, I accepted. I believe it was literally the weekend immediately following our last encounter. It was just the two of us. I attempted to persuade a couple of my friends to join, but they were too hungover and claimed it was excessively early. Matt and I simply enjoyed our time playing golf, which I believe spanned only 9 holes and took us about 2 hours. Afterward, we shared a meal, and then I returned home to unwind before my work commitments the following day. I saw Matt one additional time socially after that, before he proposed a hiking excursion with him to Arizona. Frankly, Arizona and the Grand Canyon had always been on my personal bucket list. I simply verified the dates with my workplace and confirmed my availability first, and my answer was an immediate yes. I asked Tyler and a few other friends to accompany us, but they emphatically declined. They cited difficulties with taking time off work and the need to conserve funds, which were the typical responses from any of my friends when I tried to organize a trip. I inquired if any of Matt's friends were attending, and he replied negatively, indicating he was embarking on the journey solo due. I actually hadn't met any of Matt's acquaintances yet. His NetConnect profile, however, portrayed him as an exceptionally popular individual, so I didn't perceive it as unusual. We departed by air on August 15th, with our return flights to Chicago scheduled for August 18th. We arrived in Arizona at night. Matt had rented a vehicle for the weekend, and en route to the Airbnb, we stopped for provisions and alcoholic beverages. By the time we reached the Airbnb, it was quite late. We consumed a couple of beers upon arrival, and I could discern that Matt was inclined to remain awake longer, but I was admittedly exhausted and wished to retire for the night. It was at this moment that I realized there was only a single bed in the Airbnb. I had never thought to ask him to confirm the presence of 2 bedrooms. When I brought up the issue, he gestured toward the couch I was occupying and stated, "It's a pull-out couch." He then advised me to relax and mentioned he wouldn't be charging me for the Airbnb. Honestly, a complimentary stay in Arizona meant I couldn't realistically voice complaints about sleeping on the couch. I extended the sofa bed, arranged the linens, and went to sleep. It proved surprisingly comfortable. In the dead of night, I awoke to Matt traversing the living room toward the kitchen to obtain water. I am a light sleeper. The slightest sound, like a pin dropping, can rouse me. I simply rolled over and drifted back to sleep. The following morning, Matt woke me early. It was a bright, magnificent day, and we drove directly to the Grand Canyon. I had no comprehension of its true enormity or the sheer number of individual trail options available. We embarked on a hike along the Bright Angel Trail. I believe I truly didn't grasp how out of shape I was until that very day. Matt, by contrast, was perfectly fine, laughing and urging me to maintain pace while I was drenched in sweat and gasping for air. We took numerous pauses, utilizing them to capture countless incredible photographs. The scenery was breathtaking. Eventually, we made our way back to the car. We had been hiking for over 2 to 3 hours, and I was in desperate need of sustenance. We stopped at a deli on the return journey. It was a lengthy drive back to Phoenix, and upon our arrival, we took a midday nap. Afterward, we explored various parts of Phoenix, and naturally, in characteristic Matt fashion, we frequented multiple bars. I barely knew the man, yet I could already tell he had a strong fondness for alcohol. Fast forward, we became exceedingly intoxicated, though I suspect I became even drunker, and I'm uncertain how. Given that Matt was consuming as many drinks as I was, we had to abandon the rental vehicle on the street and take a drive-ease service back to the Airbnb. It was late and time had inexplicably flown by. I recall little beyond Matt loudly playing music in the Airbnb for a while and plugging my phone in near the couch. I presume I simply fell asleep after that. That night, I randomly awoke, probably a couple of hours after initial sleep. My bladder was on the verge of bursting, and my mouth felt drier than the Grand Canyon itself. I rose from the couch and proceeded toward the bathroom, but then I heard something, a crack in the floor indicative of pressure. I scanned the darkened room with my eyes, but perceived nothing, so I continued to the bathroom. While I was there, midstream, I heard a door click shut. It had to be Matt's bedroom door. Upon finishing, I attempted to open Matt's door, but it was locked. I knocked, but there was no response. Whatever, I thought, and returned to the couch, falling back asleep quite easily. The next morning, I awoke around 8 a.m., my head throbbing intensely. The first thing I observed was my mobile phone. It was in an odd position. I had left it charging on the floor next to the couch bed the previous night, but now it rested on the table adjacent to the couch and was unplugged. I questioned why I might have done this, but ultimately, my conclusion was straightforward. I had simply been exceedingly drunk. That day, we obviously refrained from any hiking, as I would have surely vomited. We simply took a drive-ease to the car and then spent time driving around, exploring different neighborhoods, enjoying the scenery, and visiting the botanical gardens. I didn't really wish to drink that day, but later, Matt persuaded me, and wouldn't you know it, it was another night of becoming profoundly intoxicated. Our flight was scheduled for approximately 1 p.m. the following day, so at least we didn't have to concern ourselves with an excessively early wake-up. We returned to the Airbnb late once more. I'd estimate between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. this time. Matt insisted on allowing me to sleep in the main bed that night, simply stating it was fair. Honestly, I didn't argue. I eventually carried my bag to his room, bid him good night, and closed the door. I did not lock it, not that it would have mattered, as the locks, from what I recalled, were the type on door handles that could be effortlessly opened with something as simple as a butter knife. I wish I could recount that the story concluded there, and that we returned home peacefully the next day. Alas, I awoke that night, probably not long after falling asleep. I didn't initially comprehend what had roused me. It was akin to waking up to a sound you didn't fully consciously register because you were still technically asleep when it prompted your awakening. I scanned the room for my phone. My phone was nowhere to be found. I had plugged it in beside the bed and had the phone resting on the bed next to me, but now the cord dangled from the outlet to the floor, unaccompanied by the device. How could this reoccur? I looked on one side of the bed, then the other, and then I sprang up, screaming at the very top of my lungs, when I saw Matt lying face down, sprawled on that side of the bed on the floor. He looked up, appearing as though he had just emerged from a profound slumber. I demanded, "What are you doing?" He surveyed the room, feigning confusion, as if he didn't know how he had come to be there. He stood up and claimed he must have been so utterly blacked out that he simply wandered in to go to bed, but then remembered I was in the bed and crashed on the floor. However, that explanation lacked coherence, as he was positioned on the side of the bed furthest from the door. I then accused him of taking my phone, and he adopted an air of innocence. He suggested I ought to check beneath the bed, speculating it might have fallen. Then he knelt, peered under the bed, and instantly declared, "Bro, here it is," and retrieved it from under the bed. I gazed at him, and I genuinely felt as though I was looking at a different individual altogether. Who was this person? Did he genuinely attempt to access my phone on 2 separate occasions? I informed him I would simply return to the couch, but he insisted he would leave, and then he departed the room. You can be certain I secured the door this time. If it weren't for the phone incident, of course, I might have simply dismissed it as him being exceedingly drunk and performing some goofy act like passing out on the floor. But I was detecting something nefarious then. He took my phone, and I knew it. Since I was still somewhat intoxicated, I didn't experience much difficulty falling back asleep. Once more, I wish the story had concluded there, but it did not. I awoke one more time that night, and this time I swiftly realized the reason. At the foot of my bed, Matt stood there, though all I could truly discern was his silhouette. For some inexplicable reason, I did not jump or scream on this occasion. He seated himself on the bed and began to rub my foot. It was then that I shrieked at him to leave. He remained motionless, so I was compelled to physically shove him off the bed and out of the bedroom door. I commenced packing my garments into my bag, then rapidly gathered all my toiletries and whatever other items I had brought. He remained silent, sitting upright on the couch, observing me like a creepy non-player character, NPC, the entire time. That was the most profoundly unsettling part. I summoned a drive-ease to the airport. I refused to remain there for another single minute. He made no attempt to impede me. I arrived at the airport just as the sun began to emerge, and despite my fervent attempts to sleep, I found it impossible. My mind was simply racing. I waited there the entire duration until my flight. I paid approximately $35 to alter my seat so that I wouldn't be situated next to Matt. I kept my gaze directed out the window for the entire boarding process to avoid making eye contact with him. I did not confide in any of my friends until later that day. I simply required time to process and internalize everything. A couple of my friends remarked, "See, I told you he was weird," and highlighted that both times we had encountered him, he was alone. This also led me to consider that the sole reason he ran into me at the outdoor bar was because he had seen my NetConnect story and likely deliberately came there. This truly amounted to actual stalker behavior. I blocked his phone number and his NetConnect account, but before doing so, I visited one of his older NetConnect posts where he was depicted with friends. No one was tagged in the photograph, but I examined the comments and discovered one from a man who appeared to be in the picture. I noticed that Matt wasn't even following him, nor vice versa. I took it upon myself to send a direct message, DM, to the guy, inquiring if he was still friends with Matt. The individual responded within 10 minutes, stating, "Nah, guy's a freak. Run away." From there, he recounted his own experience, along with those of other individuals who had formerly been friends with Matt and had all found it necessary to sever ties with him. The guy untagged himself from Matt's photo, but explained he couldn't forcibly compel Matt to remove the picture. He expressed no surprise whatsoever when I related what had transpired in Arizona, and the guy's reaction was, "Guy should be in jail." It is truly astonishing that I initially believed Matt was merely a normal person seeking a male friend, but he turned out to be a potentially perilous predator. I still genuinely desire to understand what he was attempting to access on my phone. Story 2. The Beach Nightmare. This particular incident occurred last summer, approximately in mid-July. I was home from college for a few weeks and was simply endeavoring to enjoy the respite before the commencement of my next semester. My name is Kyle, and I reside in Maryland. I had been discussing plans with my two closest friends, Jason and Marcus, about undertaking an activity together, just the three of us, reminiscent of our high school days. We all attend different colleges now, making such shared time a rarity. We ultimately decided upon a weekend beach trip to Ocean City. Jason's family possesses a modest beach house there that they seldom utilize, and he secured permission for us to stay there for a few days. It was nothing extravagant, merely a two-bedroom dwelling a couple of blocks from the sandy shore, but it was perfectly suited for our needs. Simply a chance to relax, engage in some partying, and catch up. We drove down on a Friday afternoon. The weather was intensely hot, with temperatures in the upper 80s, accompanied by that heavy, humid air that clings to your skin. The moment we entered the town, it smelled distinctly of sunscreen and salt water. We spent the day strolling along the boardwalk, amusing ourselves in some of the arcades and observing people. The beach was densely populated with tourists, children frolicking with beach balls, families with their umbrellas and coolers, and lifeguards incessantly shouting at individuals to vacate restricted zones. Everything felt entirely normal. It was merely a delightful summer day. Later, we returned to the house, grilled burgers, consumed a few drinks, and initiated drinking games. By midnight, we were intoxicated and bored, and someone, perhaps Marcus, proposed we return to the beach. There is something peculiarly alluring about being near the ocean during the nighttime hours. The beach becomes almost completely deserted, the air cools significantly, and there is just a profound sense of peace about it. We didn't bring many possessions with us, only some hoodies in case we grew cold, our mobile phones, and a flashlight Jason retrieved from the kitchen drawer. We had no intention of swimming or anything of the sort, merely to linger and perhaps stroll along the shoreline. We proceeded down a side street and onto the wooden boardwalk, then descended the steps to the sand. As anticipated, it was essentially entirely deserted. The waves were consistent, and the only illumination emanated from a few lamps on the boardwalk, and the moon veiled behind some clouds. There was barely sufficient visibility to discern where the water met the shore. We walked along the edge of the surf, occasionally allowing the cold water to lap at our ankles. We exchanged jokes, conversed about miscellaneous topics, and simply whiled away the time. After a period, we paused near one of the lifeguard towers, those wooden structures they dismantle at night, and simply reclined in the sand, gazing up at the sky. That's when Jason became aware of something unusual. He abruptly sat upright and inquired, "Is that someone walking over there?" We all sat up and directed our gaze toward the direction he indicated. Initially, I perceived nothing. It merely appeared as a dark, indistinct blur near the shoreline. But then, indeed, I saw it, a figure. However, it was just a silhouette at that juncture, slowly walking right along the precise edge, where the water touched the sand, probably 50 or 60 yards distant. We presumed it was simply another individual out late like ourselves, perhaps just taking a walk. But then we observed that their locomotion was peculiar. They were not casually strolling as someone enjoying the beach might. Their walk was rigid, deliberate, and almost mechanical. Their arms did not swing naturally, and their posture was strange. Their head was inclined downward, but not entirely, making it seem as though they were staring at the sand, or perhaps meticulously scanning it. We all ceased speaking and simply quietly watched them. Something about it instilled a sense of unease within me. I distinctly recall whispering, "What the hell are they doing?" Marcus conjectured that perhaps they were simply searching for something. Jason humorously suggested it was probably some intoxicated tourist who had misplaced their keys. We somewhat laughed it off and reverted to our previous diversions, but I continued to glance at the person. A few minutes elapsed, and I noticed they had ceased all movement. They were no longer walking. They were standing completely still now, and they were definitively closer, perhaps 30 yards away. It was at that moment that I began to feel genuinely uncomfortable. We attempted not to stare or direct our flashlight at them, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. There was just something inherently unsettling about the entire situation. Marcus finally articulated, "They've been standing there for like 5 minutes. Who just stands like that?" Then Jason uttered something that caused my stomach to plummet. He declared, "He's not just standing, he's looking at you, Kyle." I was unsure if he was joking or not. I offered a nervous laugh and responded, "Nah, he's looking at the sand." But Jason shook his head and insisted, "No, look closer." His head's tilted at you. That's when Jason directed the flashlight beam at him. Honestly, I didn't even want him to do that, but he activated it and aimed the light. The beam struck the figure for just a single second before the battery began to deplete, causing it to flicker out. Yet that 1 second proved sufficient. I saw him. He was almost grayish-white in complexion, completely shirtless. He wore wet jeans, evidently saturated from the ocean. His arms hung entirely limp at his sides. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, not fractured but undeniably aberrant, and his eyes were wide open, almost bulging from their sockets. The instant that beam of light illuminated him, he moved with startling rapidity. Without any hesitation, he broke into a full sprint directly toward us. I cannot even adequately describe how unnatural it appeared. There was no preliminary build-up. He transitioned from standing completely still to running at full speed, almost as if he had been launched forward. All 3 of us shrieked and bolted. We didn't even cast a glance backward. We simply ran. I could hear Marcus behind me shouting, "Go!" as our feet heavily impacted the sand. My lungs were burning with exertion. We ran all the way back to the steps leading up to the boardwalk and did not halt until we reached the street. Only then did we turn around, but he was no longer there. The beach was utterly empty. There were no footprints behind us, only the perpetual sound of waves. We stood there, frozen, attempting to comprehend what had just transpired. We didn't speak much during the walk back to the house. Upon re-entering, we secured all the doors and windows, drew the blinds shut, and remained awake until the sun emerged. None of us could manage to sleep. I kept anticipating the sound of knocking or the sight of that pale face outside the window. But thankfully, it never materialized. The next morning, we attempted to dismiss it once more, suggesting it was probably just some drug-addled homeless individual trying to frighten people. But deep down, none of us truly believed that explanation. The manner in which he moved, the way he seemingly appeared from nowhere, the absence of footprints, it defied all logic. We stayed one additional night, but we did not venture outside the house. We departed early the following morning. Over the subsequent few weeks, we tried to put the incident behind us, but then Jason sent me a text message one night. He revealed he had been experiencing recurring dreams, the very same dream repeatedly. He would awaken to perceive the man standing in the corner of his room, soaking wet, head tilted, simply staring at him. No movement, no verbal communication, just standing. I informed him that was deeply disturbing, but I did not disclose that I was experiencing the precise same dream. Everything was identical, the man, the posture, merely standing in my room, motionless and silent. Sometimes I awaken believing I hear the distinct sound of wet footsteps in my hallway, but upon checking, no one is there. Then, just last week, almost a year later, I was scrolling through a local online community bulletin group that posted about events in Ocean City. Someone had uploaded a photograph they had captured the previous night from the beach. It was grainy and dim, but I recognized what they were describing. They wrote, "Does anyone know who this creepy guy is that I saw standing by the water at like 1 a.m.? I clicked the photo. It was blurry, yet I instantly recognized him. The same posture, the same pale skin. He was simply gazing down at the water. The comments chilled me. Even further, there were dozens of individuals stating they had seen him too. Some reported he was present for hours. One person claimed they watched him walk into the water and never re-emerge. Another mentioned discovering wet footprints on their back porch, 2 streets removed from the beach, with no prints leading to or from them. I do not comprehend what we witnessed that night, but I am certain of this. I will never return to that beach at night." Story 3. The Chasing Boat. I spent my formative years in Massachusetts, and every summer for as long as I can recall, I would devote the 3 months to a classic coastal New England town. You would be familiar with the type if you have ever visited that particular region of the country. I had a large circle of friends who consistently followed the same routine, and we would engage in all sorts of playful mischief daily after completing our respective jobs. I was 19 years old when this incident occurred, as were most of my friends. I had just finished my dockboy job for the day, so like any other evening, I messaged my friends to ascertain the plan, and then collected my friend, whom I shall refer to as Emerson, from his job so we could acquire alcoholic beverages, as he possessed the fraudulent identification. After securing the alcohol, we returned to the quaint town where we resided. We resolved to board my family's boat, which I was permitted to operate independently, to enjoy some beers while awaiting everyone else to conclude their activities. We navigated around the small peninsula we were on, heading toward a location where many people typically anchor and socialize. A couple of boats were already anchored there, and it was approximately 7 p.m., but this was not at all unusual. We located a suitable spot between the 2 existing boats, deployed our anchor, and simply relaxed and drank. We were having a pleasant time listening to the music emanating from the boat to our left, when the one to our right decided to depart. Eventually, the other boat's music ceased. We presumed they were also preparing to leave, so Emerson and I, in our newly intoxicated state, began to moan and shout for them to resume the music to sustain the festive atmosphere, along with other similar foolish utterances. But it did not happen. We were seated on the bow and had just recommenced drinking before Emerson exclaimed, "Dude, look." I turned around to observe the other boat and saw 3 individuals standing on its edge, simply staring at us. My initial reaction was to laugh, owing to my inebriation. I then turned back around, but Emerson continued to fix his gaze upon them. Now, I must admit, I do not possess a keen sense of danger. I tend to be optimistic and lighthearted regarding most situations. However, Emerson was visibly uncomfortable. I reassured him not to worry, suggesting they were probably just trying to get a better view or something of the sort. but he maintained his uncomfortable expression, which I didn't fully grasp at the time. By this point, it was quite dark, with no illumination in the area, apart from the lights from their boat. Consequently, it was impossible to discern who they were, merely their silhouettes. After several minutes of attempting to coax Emerson out of his heightened state, I turned back around and observed they were still in the identical position, staring at us. I believed it was a prank, so I retrieved the megaphone from the compartment above the steering wheel and declared, "20 to watch, fellas," an action that infuriated Emerson because he sensed something was profoundly amiss. I was in the process of replacing the megaphone when I heard one of them laugh audibly, a man, but there was something distinctly unsettling about it. It sounded almost sinister. It was slow, deep, and somewhat raspy. It was at that precise moment that I began to experience discomfort myself. Emerson arose and urged, "Let's get the hell out of here, bro." "This ain't right." But I responded that everything was fine. Immediately after that, we heard two distinct splashes in the water from their direction and noticed that only a single silhouette remained on their boat. That observation prompted Emerson to immediately commence pulling up the anchor, while I, unbelievably foolishly in retrospect, was laughing at the situation and at him. He attempted to instruct me to start the engine, while I was roaring with laughter, watching him hoist the anchor, all the while trying to consume my beer. In fact, I was so engrossed in laughter that I failed to notice the sound of the two individuals swimming near our boat. Emerson paused and looked at me, the anchor still in his hands, which caused me to pause as well. We could not see into the water as it was dark and the boat's lights were off. I called out, "Hello," and received no response. Even the sound of the splashing water ceased. Right after that, I simultaneously heard Emerson yell, "Oh!" and a sudden splash of water directly behind me before I turned and saw someone attempting to climb onto the stern of our boat. I absolutely panicked, and as I turned the key, I caught sight of a hand gripping the railing on the side of our boat near Emerson, who was shouting and holding the anchor aloft, prepared to defend us. I finally started the boat's engine and instinctively accelerated it forward, violently colliding with the sandbar that was directly in front of us. I then engaged the reverse gear and drove backward as rapidly as possible until we were out of the small bay and back into more expansive open water. I shifted the boat back into neutral, and Emerson and I simply stared at each other before he began to deliver his "I told you so" and "You're a dumbass" reprimands. I fully concurred and suggested we should return, to which he agreed. In hindsight, we should have hastily retreated to the boat docks near my house, but for some inexplicable reason, we decided to gather all the items that had been scattered around during our frantic escape. We hadn't even finished when I observed, in the direction from which we had just come, the lights of a boat approaching, and it was gaining on us with alarming speed. I exclaimed, "No way!" and leaped back to the steering wheel, pushing the throttle to its maximum. Our boat is an older model, so it doesn't achieve exceptionally high speeds, and even though I was at full throttle, they were undeniably closing the distance on us. Emerson began to lose his composure, uttering queries such as, "Who are these guys? What do they want? Why can't they just let us relax on the water?" So I instructed him to calm down and concentrated on heading directly for the docks. After approximately 5 minutes, the docks came into view, but the boat behind us was so close that we could clearly discern its bow rising and falling with the waves. I honestly had no idea what course of action to take. I executed a sharp left turn and maneuvered as close to the shore as I possibly could without running aground. And miraculously, the other boat veered off in the opposite direction. We exhaled a collective sigh of relief, but I nevertheless maintained full speed back to the docks. After successfully docking and feeling immense relief that there was no damage to the boat, we subsequently met up with our friends and recounted what had transpired. We also formulated several theories, speculating that perhaps they intended to rob us, or perhaps they desired to commandeer the boat. We did not recognize the boat, so they were likely not from the immediate area. I don't know. I prefer not to contemplate what might have occurred. I am simply grateful that we did not have to find out. I do know that I am thankful for Emerson's presence. Without his inherent skepticism, I believe events definitely could have taken a significantly worse turn